US President Donald Trump dismisses Iran's latest peace proposal as totally unacceptable. And while the increasingly fragile ceasefire still holds, Israel's Prime Minister says this is not over and tension in the Strait of Hormuz remain high, sending global oil prices surging once again. I'm Hazem Seeker, and today's newsmaker is the US-Iran conflict. An end to the conflict in Iran seems as remote as ever at this point. The US president declared Iran's latest counter-proposal to end the 10-week war a non-starter. That's after Iran demanded sovereignty over the Strait of Hormuz, war reparations, and an end to sanctions. Oil markets have responded, with prices topping $104 a barrel. The strait, which carries a fifth of the world's oil supply, is largely closed.
The US and Iran have hit yet another brick wall on the road to a possible peace plan, after the US president dismissed the latest Iranian proposal. Announcing his rejection online, Donald Trump said the proposal was totally unacceptable. He didn't provide any major reasons as to why, except that he didn't like it. In response, Iran rejected Trump's assessment, describing its proposal as legitimate and generous.
We didn't ask for any concessions. The only thing we sought was Iran's legitimate rights. I leave it to you and to our people to judge whether Iran's demands were excessive. Iran's call for an end to the war in the region, its demand that what it describes as maritime piracy against Iranian ships, actions characterized as a naval blockade, be brought to a halt, and its request for the release of assets belonging to the Iranian people, which have been unjustly frozen in foreign banks for years because of US pressure. Are these unreasonable demands?
Trump's rapid response sent oil prices rising on Monday. The 10-week-old conflict continues to drag down oil and gas supplies. One Qatari LNG vessel passed through the Strait of Hormuz en route to Pakistan on Sunday, the first Qatari vessel to do so since the war began. Iran approved the shipment to help build confidence with both Qatar and Pakistan, the latter acting as a mediator in the war. The South Korean Ministry of Foreign Affairs on Sunday announced one of its bulk carriers was being towed to a port in Dubai, after it had been hit by unidentified objects while transiting through the Strait of Hormuz a week earlier. Even without approval, a small number of ships do still make attempts with their trackers switched off. Meanwhile, the UK has deployed HMS Dragon, a Royal Navy destroyer, to the Middle East. The UK Ministry of Defence said it will pre-position in the region ahead of its potential role, but described it as a strictly defensive and independent mission. The British Defence Ministry also said the UK and France are set to host a multinational meeting with defence ministers of 40 countries on Tuesday.
And so we have never considered. I invite you to review all my statements from day one. Deploying forces to reopen the Strait of Hormuz. That has never been France's option. We have established an ad hoc mission, co-led with the British, which has brought together 50 countries and international organizations to ensure, in consultation with Iran, and by resolving any conflicts with all countries in the region and the United States, that maritime traffic and the transport of fertilizers, food, gas, oil, and goods can resume as soon as conditions allow.
In a 60 Minutes interview, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said Iran's stockpile of enriched uranium must be taken out before the war can be considered over. Iran said it has surprises in store if their enemies attacked again.
From now on, countries that follow the United States in imposing sanctions against the Islamic Republic of Iran will certainly face problems in passing through the strait.
Trump has said many times that the war would be over soon. But now, into week 10 of the conflict, that statement looks increasingly hollow.
So joining me now from Princeton to talk more about this, visiting research collaborator at Princeton University and former head of Foreign Relations Committee of Iran Security Council, Seyed Hossein Mousavian. Thanks very much for being with us. So where do you see this at the moment? President Trump has called Iran's latest peace proposal totally unacceptable. What do you take from that?
I think there is three major obstacle or problem between Iran and the US in order to reach an agreement. The first one is that the US is seeking an agreement effectively signaling Iranian capitulation, Iran's submission, surrendering, which Tehran is rejecting. The second problem is that Iran is insisting any agreement on the nuclear issue should be based on non-proliferation treaty, which Iran is member, the US is member, 190 countries are member. But the US is looking for a type of nuclear agreement beyond a non-proliferation treaty, NPT, because the US insisting Iranian nuclear facilities should be dismantled like Libya, or insisting that Iran should export its enriched uranium to United States of America. These are a very clear violation of non-proliferation treaty. There is nothing in international rules and regulations to dismantle the nuclear facility of a member of NPT. And the third major problem, to my understanding, is that Iran is seeking an agreement that would effectively end the war. But the US is looking for a type of agreement that this would leave the door open for United States and Iran and Israel to attack Iran anytime they decide to. And in this line, Iran is insisting ending war also on Lebanon, but the United States wants to leave open hand for Israel to continue its war on Lebanon. I think these are the main three problems.
I just want to turn for a moment to the situation inside Iran. According to the reports that are coming out of there, this is putting a huge strain on Iranians in terms of economic pain. Industrial sites have been hit, can't be repaired right now, massive job losses, hyperinflation with prices of everyday goods skyrocketing. How long can Iranians endure all of this, and by extension, the regime itself?
All you said is true. I mean, they are under severe economic pressure, inflation, unemployment. I mean, they are all true. Nevertheless, if we look at past 47 years, Iranians, they have been continuously under sanctions and pressures, cyber attack, different operations, even 8 years war, Saddam's invasion of Iran, but they have resisted. I think the resilience is high. They can resist. Nevertheless, more the situation continues, Iranian economic problem, social problem would be expanded.
You have said in the past the U.S. cannot be trusted when it comes to diplomacy after everything that has happened in recent weeks. Why should Iran believe negotiations at this point can still work?
Iranians always they have insisted that they cannot trust the US. At the same time, they have never left the diplomacy track. I mean, the reason they cannot trust the US is the fact already there was an agreement. The US, Iran agreed, Iran and the world powers agreed. The United Nations Security Council passed a resolution, adopted Resolution 2231. IAEA, International Atomic Energy Agency, passed resolutions. Iran was in full compliance with zero failure, but the US withdrew and imposed the maximum pressure strategy, maximum sanctions. In 2025, they were negotiating as Omani foreign minister, the mediator, said the deal was within reach, but the US attacked Iran. 2026, again, the Omani minister said they were very close to a deal, significant progress on diplomacy, but again, the US left diplomacy and attacked. That's why it is three major episodes we have seen. The US is not committed to diplomacy, but nevertheless, many countries like Qatar, like Oman, like Turkey, like Egypt, like Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, they are all inviting Iran, encouraging Iran to continue diplomacy, and they are very active in diplomatic solution, pushing the US for solution. But unfortunately, the US, as I said, is not ready to make a deal because of those three main issues which I mentioned.
Good to have you on with us, Seyed Hossein Mousavian. Thanks very much. Well, joining me now to talk much more about this from London, we have Professor of International Relations at the London School of Economics and Political Science, Fawaz Gerges. Also from the UK capital, President of the US Middle East Project and former advisor to the Israeli government, Daniel Levy. And from Madison, Wisconsin in the US, retired US Army Colonel Liam Collins. Thanks very much for being with us. So, Fawaz, let me start with you. Do you believe the US and Israel have a long-term strategy on Iran, or are they just reacting right now to events rather than having a long-term plan?
I don't think there is a strategic vein in President Trump's, body. Chaotic, improvisation, temperamental, on the go, no end game, hardly any thinking about the morning after, a grave strategic miscalculation. President Trump finds himself in a binding strategic box. He's desperately trying to get out. The Iranians won't give him what he desperately desires, declaring victory and getting out. We are in a limbo state, no war and no peace. The ceasefire is fraying. The Iranians have humiliated President Trump. They have turned a very weak hand into a strong one. The question that we have no answer to is that where do we go from here? Given the fact that the differences between the United States and Iran are unbridgeable. Will hostilities be renewed? We'll be basically in the same position a few months from now. No one knows, and really, this is a very unknown territory at this particular point.
Daniel Levy, I'm wondering if you feel the same way about that, and I want to ask you as well, Israel, under Netanyahu, has said that its actions in all of this are about restoring deterrence and security. Looking around the region today, do you think Israelis are safer?
Well, first, I would agree with what Fawaz just shared with us. As for whether Israelis are safer, I think it's a hard claim to make. In fact, Israel went into this latest round having claimed that they had largely destroyed not only the axis of resistance in its physical manifestations, but also the concept, the belief that one could resist. But here we are, after this latest war that Israel dragged the US into, and if anything, that looks very different. Iran has equipped itself far better than was anticipated, given that it was in a war with not just Israel, but also the US. Israel's claims that Hezbollah was a spent force have been proven to be significantly premature. That's not what we're seeing. And even in Gaza, despite 2.5 years, which included genocidal war crimes on the part of the Israeli side, the Gazan population is still there, Hamas is still there. But I think the crucial thing to understand is, I guess, the flip side to what Fawaz just shared with us, which is alongside American strategic incompetence, incoherence, everything we know about this US administration, there is a strategy on the Israeli side. I think that's the big difference. And even though there's a disparity between American and Israeli power, if one side in an alliance knows what it's trying to achieve and the other doesn't, then the side with a plan has the upper hand. And Israel has a plan, and that plan is not to achieve deterrence. That plan is to try to dismantle the central Iranian state, to use American firepower to generate maximum degradation so that Iran starts to collapse as a state, starts to fragment. That is the region Israel wants to live in, a region in which states are either too weak, fragmented, collapsed to challenge Israel, or they can be co-opted by Israel. That's the domination it's trying to achieve. It wants to use American power to achieve that, but it's not going as planned in Iran. But Israel is very clear at this stage. Israel does not want a negotiated outcome, does not want an end to this, and is trying to pull the US back into another round, into further escalation.
Colonel Liam Collins, from a military and strategic perspective, then, what conditions need to exist before a durable peace agreement with Iran could realistically hold?
Oh, I mean, first of all, like any negotiation, the sides need to have a bargaining range that overlaps. And right now, that doesn't look possible. It may be possible with continued, as costs continue to mount. But from one perspective, right, war is simply an expensive bargain in which each nation is trying to demonstrate their capability and resolve to get a better outcome. And we've seen this play out, right, as the U.S. ratchets up, right, its pressure. We've seen Iran decrease their demands. Right now, it seems the impasse really primarily has to do with nuclear weapons program for Iran. The U.S. wants Iran to hand over its highly enriched stockpile and permanently stop enrichment. Iran, their stance is they want to halt for a shorter period of time and not dismantle anything. So until you get an agreement on that, or there's some kind of an overlap, that's not going to happen. And so I would expect this to go on for several more months, because until it becomes more costly for one side or the other to then have an agreement. And for the U.S., that has to do with, right, continuing the blockade against Iran to mount the political, economic, and diplomatic pressure on Iran, or for Iran to exert its force by continuing to put the cost on other Gulf states by closing the straits and keeping the cost of trade in oil high.
Fawaz Judges, I take on board what you said in your first answer, that you don't see the Trump administration having any sort of a long-term plan in all of this. But even with that in mind, what realistic pathway is there out of this, do you think, given that trust as well seems to have completely broken down between the two sides?
You know, analytically, if I were Iran, I would not trust Donald Trump. Does anyone trust Donald Trump? We used to say that the word of an American president was gold. Sadly and tragically, the word of an American president now is junk. So that's why the Iranians are not taking Donald Trump seriously. That's why the Iranians have made it very clear. They want a lasting end to the war. They do not really want an end to the hostilities. They want guarantees that neither the United States nor Israel would attack Iran again and again. But who can give Iran ironclad guarantees? China probably, but China does not really want. China is happy to have the United States digging in. The reality is, I mean, this is what we have. Who will blink first? Iran is counting on President Trump blinking first. The domestic opposition to the war is extensive, even within the MAGA movement. Inflation in the United States is picking up. A huge majority of Americans oppose the war. The world economy is suffering a great deal. Imagine if few months, 5-6 months, I mean, the World Bank, the IMF, they're talking about the likelihood of recession. Americans are paying now almost $5 for a gallon of gas. The midterm elections are coming up in a few months. So this is really, is that who can blink first? Who will scream first? My take on it, as your earlier, Iranian guest said, Iran is suffering a great deal. Iran has some major structural vulnerabilities. I mean, inflation, unemployment, lack of food and resources. So all in all, it seems to me we have to wait and see who can really blink first. At the end of the day, I don't see renewal of hostilities. In particular, President Trump is going to China next week, and surely he will not carry out any major military campaign against Iran. But he has a weak hand now. I mean, the Chinese are watching very hard. But I don't really, basically, I could see limited escalation in the next few weeks, because I think what Benjamin Netanyahu will try to do is to try to convince Donald Trump again that basically Iran could be, forced to submit. But I was struck after the call between President Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu. Donald Trump said, well, look, I am the only one, I am alone who make the final decision vis-a-vis Iran. It tells me he knows very well the criticism of what Benjamin Netanyahu has been able to do in the United States. But truly, no one knows what will happen. If we're speculating a great deal, but what we have now is a limbo state of no war and no peace, and the ceasefires fraying, and Iran basically is threatening its own neighbors, particularly the United Arab Emirates and Kuwait, because it has the capacity, it's threatened to basically attack the energy infrastructure in the region, which basically this could be really catastrophic for the world economy, much more than it has been so far.
Okay, let's get Daniel's take on this. How do you see this possibly playing out? Are we in this kind of cycle where each round of force creates the conditions for the next, or does it get to a point, as Fawaz said, where it comes down to who's going to blink first?
Well, yes, in terms of what we have seen as the trajectory of this, in this kind of asymmetric warfare, which is what we're very clearly in, a big part of the outcome is determined by endurance, resilience, pain thresholds. And the US has consistently misdiagnosed what those look like, Israel encouraging it along that path of misdiagnosing those things. So the US assumes that it can sustain a pain threshold. And it's true, the Iranians are taking more severe pain, more severe hits, but the pain threshold of those parties is not the same. So economic pain for America will be less, but it may be more significant in terms of the conclusions politically that the US side has to draw. And therefore, where we bizarrely find ourselves is that the US right now is probably trying to achieve three things, all of which it had before it started this illegal war of choice. It wants to open Hormuz. It was open before America launched this war. It wants to end the war. There was no war before America launched this war. And it wants to make sure that Iran does not pursue nuclear weaponization. That's the area that's a little more cloudy, but that was dealt with in the deal which was agreed under the Obama administration, which Trump reneged on. And that was the fatwa of the former supreme leader of Iran, who the Israelis, with America's backing, assassinated. So those things, what America is now trying to achieve, I agree with other guests who've suggested there is not a zone of overlapping, negotiating, potential alignment. You also don't have serious negotiators on the American side. Let's just acknowledge and be upfront about that. What you might therefore have is President Trump, who lives in his own information environment, in his own echo chamber, and when it's contradicted simply says fake news, failing news. He may simply finish his speech where he declares war, walks away, and doesn't actually come out of this with any of the things he seeks to address. And let's not forget, you do have a nuclear power in the Middle East, but its nuclear program, and I'm talking about Israel, has never been addressed. So there's that broader question of a nuclear-free Middle East in the future or not.
Colonel Liam Collins, I want to ask you about the impact all of this is having on American servicemen and women who are out there right now. There's growing concern over the effects on sailors' physical and mental health, dwindling supplies. How is that affecting the military plans in the region?
I mean, first of all, very minimal impact on the military. This is what they sign up for. This is what they're used to, right? I mean, the war in Iraq took many years. The war in Afghanistan took more than a decade. Vietnam took many years, right? I mean, this is what we expect, right? Even if decision makers, elected officials, too often think wars are going to be short in duration, the military knows, and we plan for wars to be much longer. That's how they almost always turn out. The 2020 Nagorno-Karabakh war being one of those rare exceptions when it's a shorter war. And so I don't think there was this is no false expectation on the military side that this would be short. And so they're prepared for that.
All right, we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you to all of our guests. Thanks for being with us. Daniel Levy, who joined us earlier but had to go, Fawaz Judges, and Liam Collins. Thanks very much for being with us. And thank you for watching. Remember, you can follow us on social media and be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. I'm Hazem Sika. We'll see you next time.